listening to Mediation Station. The number to call us during the show is 416-785-0680. We present topics and guests to explore matters that take place in our daily lives. This is to provide you with options to make different decisions in a more informed manner. You can contact us at Mediation Station at greggf@primus.ca and 647-227-4734. Thank you, Alexander, for doing the boards, and thanks to Sabrina for video recording the radio program. Our topic tonight is called Coaching Courage to be in Conflict. Our guest is Cinnie Noble, who is with us tonight to discuss matters in more depth, and she'll be with us shortly. The Family Information and Mediation Program is available at each of the Family Law Information Centers located in family courts throughout Ontario. Information is available regarding separation, divorce, related family law issues, family justice services, options to going to court including mediation, local community resources, and court processes, along with the forms to use when dealing with family law matters. There is also an advice council available for people to access for free legal advice on family law issues. Information and referral coordinators are available at the family courts to help you understand your needs and to make referrals to appropriate services in the family court system and in the community. They can give you information about family mediation and other options to deal with your matters, so you do not need to go to court or need to hire a lawyer. There are family information and mediation programs located at all three family courts in Toronto. The programs are called Mediate 393, located at 393 University Avenue, Mediate 311, located at 311 Jarvis Street, and Mediate 47, located at 47 Shepherd Avenue East. The office hours vary at each location from Monday to Friday. The best thing to do is to call for more information at 416-593-5393 or email info@mediate393.ca or visit the website at www.mediate393.ca. The Toronto Resource Centre for Peaceful Conflict Resolution at www.pcrtoronto.org would welcome your visit. The website aims to promote values, ideas, and methods of nonviolent communication and peaceful conflict resolution worldwide, and to provide information about related resources available locally to Greater Toronto Area residents. The website also wishes to cover a wide spectrum of situations which could benefit from peaceful communication and conflict resolution skills, and to present thoughts of various cultures about the importance of peaceful coexistence. Again, the web address is www.pcrtoronto.org. Each Monday here at San Lorenzo at 22 Winterley Drive in the Dufferin and Lawrence West area, we have the San Lorenzo Community Mediation Program. It's a free and confidential service available and open to anybody to use between the hours of 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. If you have an issue within a relationship, whether in the family, the neighborhood, the community, the workplace, we assist you in trying to identify any of the concerns and also to strategize about creating some positive change to assist you and others in terms of trying to make the situation better as you define it. So it's a free and confidential service. You can contact me at greggf@primus.ca or 647-227-4734. The Raffle of Hope is taking place here at San Lorenzo in support of projects of the Caravan of Hope. The tickets, which is a donation for the raffle, are $10 each, and you have an opportunity to win one of 5 prizes, including the first prize, which is a 2013 Mazda car. The draw will take place on June 22nd at the Inti Raymi Festival, which is the major fundraiser for CHHA, 1610 a.m. And that's the 21st and 22nd at Christie Pitts Park, outside the Christie subway station. So you can contact here at San Lorenzo at 22 Winterley Drive, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday. Also want to share about Healthy Minds Canada, which is a national organization that raises money for addictions and mental health matters. They're looking to raise funds to create an app to assist in terms of bullying. It's designed to improve empathy while teaching coping and preventative skills to young people ages 9 to 16. And so you can contact at healthymindcanada.ca and check out about the opportunity to assist in the creation of this app. So, what else? I had just recently completed the project Turning Things Around for the organization called Delta Family Resource Center. And they're doing their first annual silent auction. It's taking place this coming Wednesday, June 4th. And it's taking place in Woodbridge, 177 Whitmore Road at the Resto Lounge. And there'll be programming, there'll be a silent auction as mentioned, and food. It's helped to support the programs that Delta provides to the community in the North Etobicoke area of Toronto. If you want more information, you can contact 416-747-1171 at extension 75, or go to the website at www.dfrc.ca. Do a shout out to a couple of friends, both down in Texas. One is Dave Hilton, who has a unique web TV show that provides guests talking about dispute resolution, conflict management, mediation, conflict coaching. And his show is weekly, and you can access it at www.conflictshow.com. And also, another friend, Patty Porter, Texas Conflict Coach, and she's at www.texasconflictcoach.com, and she has a live radio blog each week on Tuesday, 8 p.m. Toronto time, which is 7 p.m. Central or Texas time. And she's a friend connection of our guest tonight, so we'll explore that more in detail shortly. So if you want to tune in, you want to give us a call, you can do so at 416-785-0680. And Alexander would be happy to take your call. No, you wouldn't? Okay. All right, fine. We'll negotiate something. Yeah. So, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm a little warm. Like, the lights here are just, I don't know, maybe it's just the pressure. We're just under the pressure. So we're speaking with Cinnie Noble. And
Hi, Greg.
we're talking tonight about coaching courage to be in conflict. So welcome to Mediation Station, Cinnie.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Greg.
How about you share a bit of information about yourself, including your professional background, so we can better understand?
Well, where do I begin?
Well, I mean, we have a history together, so we'll probably explore that a little bit. But
That's true. So before I went to law school, in my it's a mid-career for me, and it started out life as a social worker, and I worked with people with disabilities. And that was in a hospital, and I still travel a lot, but in those travel days I was noticing, especially because I was working all the time with people with disabilities, that I didn't see people in wheelchairs, and I wasn't seeing people who were vision impaired, and it really occurred to me that there was something missing. And so I researched, just out of curiosity, why that was the case, and couldn't find why it was the case, and there was nobody in Canada who was had a travel agency for people with disabilities, or a program within their agency. And I went on to start the first travel program. It was a division of an existing agency, and that was a long time ago, and it really propelled me to go to law school because I became a really strong advocate. And having had a social work background, I didn't have those skills, and realized that I did actually when I had to use them. And that got me into law school, I guess, because I was so convinced that there was more to be done in the field, but I couldn't find work in human rights or people with disabilities specifically when I graduated.
mm,
So I actually ended up in family law.
right.
And quickly, which is when I was teaching, and
Mhm.
Greg, you were in my course at York, and I found after a number of years I moved from family law per se to family mediation. It was a natural progression for me, and I really didn't love being a lawyer, and being a litigator, going to court and fighting that fight. So I moved into family mediation, and ultimately I went and took a Master's of Law in ADR, and shifted my practice into workplace. And that was workplace mediation and ultimately coaching, which we're going to talk about.
Right, yeah. And so how long have you been focused on the coaching area?
I started in '99,
Yeah,
well now.
so you know, we connected first in '97 when I took the course at York University, which I'd like to help promote. Have a couple of individuals who are Sabrina and Alexandra, who are part of that program as well, graduates. So
Good program.
yeah, and it's evolved over time. You know,
Certainly.
it's had changes from
Sure.
whence we first were involved
Right.
to now. And you know, just understand a little bit about yourself. When you were growing up as a young person, what were the things that raised your curiosity?
You know, it's such a great question. As long as I can remember, I have been curious about people and why people do what they do. And it's funny actually they asked that, because just the other day I was in a conversation with somebody who said, what do you remember, something more about what you were going to be when you grow up.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember saying, I was young, and I was said to my mother, how do people know what they want to be when they grow up? And she said, well, they find what makes them happy. And I knew that wasn't really altogether true, because I knew people who weren't that happy doing what they were doing. And so I said, well, how do you know when you're happy? And she said, you'll know it when you see it. And so that was kind of interesting, and it stuck in my brain, right?
Yeah.
And it is especially stuck in my brain because many years later in the legal field, there was a big case, a legal case about the definition of obscenity, and a judge said, you'll know it when you see it.
Yeah.
So over time, I just decided that whatever would make me happy, what was that going to be? And it was usually about helping people. And that was my biggest curiosity, is what does it take for that to happen?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like the distinction of a job or career, something that we have to do, which is like a job to make a living, or our passions, things more connected to who we are
Right.
and what we feel, and we want, you know, what we're trying to extend onto someone else. So, you know, doing this work is my passion. I do it because I want to do it,
Right.
not because I have to do it. And, you know, you find ways to make yourself connected to it, and having it connected to you. It's a mutual relationship.
Absolutely.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll have more of the show. You're listening to Mediation Station on CHHA, 1610 AM, Voices Latinas.
More far away. More Mediation Station on CHHA, Radio Voices Latinas, 1610 AM.
Welcome back to the program. We're here with Cinnie Noble, our guest, talking about coaching courage to be in conflict. So, Cinnie, you mentioned that you've got like social work as a starter career type thing, and then you gravitated and moved into law, and now you're into coaching and conflict coaching. Do you find having the basis of social work and law was something that you had to contribute to why you're now, or something that actually, you know, I wouldn't say created a barrier or an obstacle? How helpful was it, or is it?
I think totally helpful. I think I feel privileged actually to have the opportunity to try new things. And so I didn't feel that I was so married to social work that I couldn't leave. And then once I did law and realized, especially because I'd had careers before law, I felt more flexible about saying, what else do I do with this? Because the practice wasn't working. And then as mediation developed, I also started to see some huge gaps. So you can tell I'm a gap, you know, I recognize the gap or
Yeah.
something.
Mhm.
And so once I started to see a gap in the ADR field about coaching, then it felt like natural progression of what I had before to just keep building on it.
So it's a constantly evolving,
Yeah,
you know,
I
kind
would
of
say.
mindset,
I think that's right.
and, you know, it's constant, so you're somebody who must be very comfortable with change.
I think I'm sort of a risk taker at heart, so
Yeah.
I think that helps me try something out. And I remember somebody saying years ago about when I was starting to think about shifting that if you didn't, what would happen? And I said I'd probably be disappointed in myself. And so that was enough for me to be my criteria for whether I would move on or try something new.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to second guess yourself and like go through life and then have these regrets and saying, I wish I had.
Right. I can remember actually moving into mediation from law, and a colleague of mine saying to me, well, it's so trendy, and, you know, being concerned for me. And then, of course, it wasn't trendy at all. And then when I moved into coaching, she said, what's a bit trendy. And when I started to hear the same refrain again, I thought, yeah, well, we'll see about that. And it is not. And so I think it's being willing to go with that. And I also think, because I've tried lots of things that haven't worked, that's part of moving through careers and looking at what else can I do, and knowing that some things won't work and some will.
Right, and taking things and seeing how it can be adapted or modified in some way
Mhm.
in order to make it more meaningful or be able to be connected with people and their lived experiences.
Exactly.
So how'd you get yourself to see things from a collaborative mindset after having been educated and practiced within a very adversarial and positional approach overall in working with people?
I actually think the reason that I didn't fit so well once I fell into law was that I'd had a career before where I learned when I was doing travel for people with disabilities that the only way to negotiate a change of bringing people with disabilities into the travel industry was collaboratively. I wasn't in court and I wasn't fighting a fight, but I was fighting a fight in a different way, and I learned collaborative skills then. So for me, going to law was more extreme than I wanted. So when I was a litigator, I just found it didn't fit my skin. And it didn't, and it actually, in family law especially, I thought that people hire us to go to court to fight for how often they're going to see their children, and I just could not adhere, stomach it. It just seemed like adhering to the case law and the way that things were done felt so antithetical to who I was, that it just didn't fit. So I think it's that I just never got there.
Yeah, no, in a way, I mean, the intention, I would see, of going to law in court is that it's supposed to be a way of resolving conflict or issues, yet the experience can be where it actually exacerbates issues, relationships, conflicts, because of the positional and adversarial disconnect among people.
It's absolutely true, and I think what I found as a coach that I don't think lawyers know very well about and don't think about very much, that when a case is finished, for them it's finished. And what I see in front of me are the people that have got lingering doubts and I wished I'd said and I wish it hadn't gone that way, and a lot of people who have resolved because they just wanted to get it over with. And that sort of not able to bounce back, it really affects how people manage conflict. And I learned it so in a way that I thought, boy, we need to know that when we let people go at the end of a case, that's the end of it for us as lawyers, but it's not the end of it for them. And so if we fought the fight, then they have to live together or know each other or have any association, or even if they don't, that what they're left with, it just doesn't seem like a right way to do things in life.
Right, at that point, I mean, that's not the end, as you say, of their journey. It's actually, it could be the start of something whole new. Yet at the same time, even when they're going through the court matters, they are affected and experiencing other issues outside of the court, which do affect within the court, and then court does affect outside.
Absolutely.
It's the connection of, all those experiences, regardless of the setting, they're all connected. We're all human beings. We carry our experiences from one space to the next.
Exactly.
In various relationships, right?
Yeah, I like to say that the remnants of one conflict shroud the next and the next and the next. And so if we keep doing that and we don't help people as a holistic approach to conflict, that we aren't really doing much of a service in the end.
Right. So you work with people for the past number of years, as you mentioned, in coaching them through situations of conflict or change. So why do you focus on being a coach and in coaching? So that's more one-on-one type.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I still run a mediation practice because I think it's a great service, and so in situations where people want that, what happened with going into coaching was kind of a number of instances. I'll only relate a few of them to you. But one, for instance, is I was a mediator in a bank, and a situation between a manager and staff member. They appeared to resolve it. Everything seemed to be okay. And about 6 months later, I was at the same bank again, and I ran into the woman who started the mediation, and I said, "Oh, how are things?" She said, "Oh, I'm so glad we got that settled. It was such a relief. But my manager has never been quite the same with me. I think he resents me." I thought, that's kind of interesting. We don't get to follow up very much. And she was having trouble knowing how to communicate with him. And then in another place that I was working in a hospital, I saw a manager in another dispute. And about 3 months after that, I saw him again. in another mediation, and I thought, okay, so, he's here because he actually is having trouble managing conflict. It isn't about the issues. Those two instances were followed by about 3 or 4 when I thought there's something that we're missing, that maybe if we can get people early on about how to manage conflict, that we would be doing more of a service to people. So I looked into the field of coaching. It's a very broad field and a wonderful field that has developed standards of conduct and accreditation in a way that has a lot of integrity, very professional organization. The International Coach Federation is the one I'm referring to. That is probably the biggest international organization. And I saw that there was the concept of one-to-one and their basic philosophy, which is people are creative, resourceful, and whole. And I loved that, and it resonated so much with what I think about people. You asked me earlier, I'm fascinated about people, and I thought if we look at people as creative, resourceful, and whole, we treat them as creative, resourceful, and whole, and not as the problem or not as the conflict. And so nobody was doing conflict management coaching specifically. I call conflict coaching also conflict management coaching. And a lot of people dealt with conflict though, but they didn't have a model. And so I did a tremendous amount of research with people who I knew from organizations and developed a model in order to do that. And the shift for me to go to one-on-one work felt so natural because I became then so hung on the idea that one-to-one work really would help people prevent unnecessary conflict, help them through it, and help them deal with the aftermath. And so a lot of my work is very dispute specific for people having those issues going on that are happening in their lives, but I also deal with people who decide that they just don't like the way they're managing conflict and they want to figure out a better way to interact and communicate. And so it's more behavioral kind of conflict coaching.
Right, I mean, a lot of people going through, let's say, using the court system as an approach to resolve conflict for themselves, they're continually within that kind of system and that approach because they get resolution, quote, for the immediate on dealing with a particular matter that they bring to court, yet that's their whole manner of dealing with conflict. I would think that it would be much more helpful and meaningful for people to find a way to not go to court, to not allow things to evolve into such a negative situation.
Well, it's true. We're a very reactive society, though, and I've taught in all different parts of the world, and we generally are pretty reactive, and so it's how to get to people early on and to preempt that, and if not, when they're going through the conflicts, how to support them through that. So you could coach people while they're going to court or while they're in a mediation or at any time when they just want to do it better.
Right, we'll talk more about that. We're going to take another break.
Good stuff.
You're listening to Mediation Station on CHHA, 1610 AM, Voices Latinas.
Mediation Station on CHHA, Radio Voices Latinas, 1610 AM.
We're here, we're live. You can call us at 416-785-0680. We can have a little chat, whatever tonight's topic or something else that's going on in your life, and we'll see what we can do. So give us a call. We welcome that. We're with our guest, Cinnie Noble, and we're talking about coaching courage to be in conflict. And your focus, your emphasis, your passion, your journey is taking you to deal with people more one-on-one, and you've created a model, and you've obviously had you've looked at people, you've experienced people through different kinds of settings of conflict. So what do you find are people's obstacles in dealing with conflict?
Oh, it's such a great question, and I think I actually learned more about people in conflict from coaching them than I ever had as a lawyer or a mediator. And where to begin with that? So a lot of things that I find about most of us in conflict is that we don't want to be there. And as a consequence, people either avoid it or figure out how to resolve it in a way that they're not always satisfied with, just to make it go away.
Or put it off to somebody else to help resolve.
Or put it off to somebody else. That we don't come with those skills. When you think about how did you learn how to manage conflict, many people learn mostly in their families of origin, and many people learn what not to do in their families of origin, but there's not a rule book, right? So you can't say, gee, if I run into this situation, I'll look it up in the book. And so it's mostly trial and error. And we generally develop habits about how we manage conflict, and we don't think of them as habits, and we don't think we can change them. And so a situation happens, and we'll fall on the sword that we have chosen, and about how we deal with it. And that can be the way you do it forever. When people come to me, it just isn't working for them. The relationships aren't working, and they don't like themselves. They're not aligned with their values about who they want to be in the world. And one of the many things I found out is people often feel a lot of shame when they're in conflict. They are shamed that they're in it. They're shamed about what they say. They're shamed about what the other person says.
And they got themselves into it too in the first place.
And they're shamed that they've done that.
Yeah.
And so shame is just one of the emotions, but many people don't talk about that. And many people are fearful in conflict. They don't know what they're going to do and don't know how to manage, and often shoot themselves in the foot pretty quickly. Wear it for a long time. I mentioned earlier the resilience. People that I coach, I've often experienced continually, it could have been 5 years ago, a conflict with somebody, and they still feel it. And in talking about it, it's like it happened yesterday. So that inability to get past it, what I've learned comes from not being able to identify early on and do enough self-reflection to figure out what's going on and how do I shift it. So, you hear people say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I've found that you can. And, you need to be willing and able and motivated to make changes. And so I've seen tremendous change in people because they really just don't want to do it that way anymore.
And it's the manner in which it's approached, and the approach, the style, the relationship that could be, that's established with the person who's experiencing the conflict and the person who's there to assist them to work with that conflict and through that conflict.
I think that's true, and what I find in coaching, building a rapport with somebody is so integral to them being able to just let down and say what they wouldn't say, for instance, in a mediation. That people just, all the real vulnerabilities come out, the real insecurities that they would be afraid to admit in front of somebody else. And it's often what keeps them from being satisfied and making decisions during a mediation process that they are unable to do because they just can't manage it very well.
People have to feel safe that they can open up. It has to be a sense of trust.
Absolutely.
And that they can share their most interpersonal experiences and feelings and thoughts.
Well, and I think in mediation, lots of great mediators will do that, and yet a lot of people go to mediation with the idea that they're there to resolve issues. And when people come to me, that's not what their focus is. They want to either communicate better, feel better about what's going on, be in a better space, heart space and mind space to be able to, if they're going to go to a mediation or approach the person independently, they just want to be in a better space than where they are.
Right, and a lot of my background is with community mediation, and the intention of community mediation is when people are experiencing conflict, it's not actually to get resolution of the conflict. It's to help people find better ways to build their personal capacities, acquire skill sets so that they can then deal with their issues, their concerns, their matters in a different way.
Yeah, that's great.
That's the priority,
Yeah.
Capacity building, looking at things from a more holistic perspective. And then by acquiring those skills and having that perspective, they can then work to connect better with the matters that are going on and hopefully resolve things.
No, that's a really great approach.
So you've obviously taken a great focus on matters. You developed a program. There's something called Synergy.
Mm-hmm.
What can you share about with us about
So
that?
Synergy model, CINERGY, it's 7 steps with each letter. So it is a process that starts always with the C is to clarify the goal. And that means the coach needs to be very focused on what the client wants, why they're there in front of you, and not to impose what you think the client should or ought to do. The I is finding out what's going on, what brought them to coaching. The N is getting underneath it and finding out, it's name the elements. And so I did research that I discovered that all of us go through a certain trajectory when we're provoked. And I found out when I was writing my book that in fact there's some brain science that's going about emotional regulation that supports what I found experientially, which is the group that one of the study groups I had called it the not so merry-go-round of conflict. So name the elements is looking at these various elements about where you go to in conflict, what triggers you, what underlies that, what the impact is, what your assumptions are, and it follows a sequence. And people get underneath it in that stage, and then in the E stage they start to look at what to do about it. So it moves from deconstructing the conflict to reconstructing. And the E stage is looking at their options, doing a critical analysis of what they could do and not do. And usually that's about process. So for instance, they might say, I need to have a conversation. Many people in my work want to handle something independently. They're not necessarily being prepared to go to a process. And they want to try that first. So the R stage is reconstruct. It is helping people rehearse their conversation, how they're going to look, how they're going to act, play it out for themselves so that they actually start to figure out what they're going to do about it in a action-oriented way. And the G stage is ground the challenges, which is what'll get in the way of you going, and the Y is yes, the commitment, which is when, where, why. It could take 4, 5, 6 sessions for people to get through the whole model. It's a slow process to help people because it's really based on self-reflection and helping people build on what they know and what they want to know in order to move ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's a creative way too of identifying your model for purposes for people to, oh, yeah, synergy. So that's Cinnie Noble, because Cinnie, synergy, and then synergy is actually with S, but the whole thing with synergy is connection, being aligned, being attuned.
Right. I'm lucky I got that name. So.
Yeah.
The last name Noble, my company's Noble Solutions, the mediation part. I just got really blessed with great names.
You've got great names, perfect in the field.
That's right.
So in terms of like when a person contacts you and they're going through something, what would that process look like?
So I get people either before, during, or after conflict, or because they've got a behavioral issue. They may be referred by, say, an organization because they have had some complaints, or they might self-identify. So it depends on what reasons they're coming to see me, and there's always a kind of contracting piece to make sure that they are ready and committed and they know what it is. Coaching has had a history of being remedial and punitive, and the process, the Coach Federation, those of us who are certified, operate more on the basis that it's a way to optimize potential. So as long as people know that and they are ready to develop and work, so it's contracting, describing the model, and then getting commitment to work on over
full
time.
Transparency of what, this is what the expectations and responsibilities are as part of the roles.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, confidentiality, it's not privileged, but letting people know that it's so I'm not going to go and tell their boss, for instance, if they've referred me. Also that it is voluntary, so people don't have to go. If they don't want to be there, they don't need to be there, right?
Right. People
are pretty committed though, and usually by the time they call or they're referred, they're ready and they know that. So it is a process, and unlike other processes like mediation, there's always a follow-up. I evaluate, I find out what works, what doesn't. You co-create a relationship, you partner with that person, so it's a bit different up from other processes, and so there's a follow-up. I always want to know, because my curiosity with people, what works, what doesn't work,
Right.
how come, what could I do differently?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. We're always questioning ourselves, we're always self-evaluative in some form to see and reflect, to see, for this situation, what was helpful, meaningful, what could have been different.
Exactly.
Trying to take a lot of the language too, of the negative words, and so as part of what I do, I don't mention problem, these are not problems. I neutralize the words or frame it into a more positive perspective, because my sense is that when you use language that's negative, you reinforce the whole mindset of negativity.
Right.
So it's got to start right from the get-go when you first contact individuals.
And what you model like that, how do you model what you do? Unlike some processes like mediation, some forms of mediation, I don't reframe, I don't summarize. It's all about the client. Less is more, and it really is helping, though I run the process, it's helping people get in touch with their own intuition. So instead of using my own, even though I might think it's strong, I'll ask them, what's your gut telling you now? And rely on what's inside them to build that internal
Self-determination.
It's totally self-determination, yeah.
Is there a different way, or do you do things in a modified way with situations where people are going through high conflict?
High conflict?
Yes.
You know, again, it's all about their goal. And so I'm not going to see the other person. And, you know, sometimes people ask me if it's anger management that I do, or I work with bullies. I work with anybody who's willing to work, whether it's high conflict or not. And remember, they're trying to self-manage, and they're trying to figure out ways they can manage differently. And so my goal with them as a coach, what they find out is, what's going to be different now? What are you going to do differently? And, you know, many people say, well, you know, she should be here and he should be here. And what we all know is that if somebody changes their paradigm, it often has an effect on someone else. When you're in high conflict, you don't know that very well easily, or that doesn't come. So I work incrementally with people who are used to high conflict relationships to build and to start to shift. And they might determine that relationship doesn't work for them anymore, or they figure out a different way of being who they are. It's totally up to how they want to be. You know, remember, it's a person's goal. And so I've coached people who are very collaborative, but they want to be competitive because they've just moved into an organization that's highly competitive, and they want to, you know, develop those skills.
Right. They want to move up. They want to get something more within the field or the practice, the profession.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's making sure that people really want to make the shift, and then if they don't, then naming that and finding out what's going on, that if people aren't trying to do it after all, that maybe people are comfortable in some of the relationships, even though they sound like they're not.
And in terms of your follow-up, what would that look like?
I always contact people between 3 and 6 months after, and I do a written follow-up if they want, or a verbal one, up to them, to find out what's working, what they are continuing to apply, and what they've learned that is most meaningful for them.
Right, and it's really based on them determining
Yes.
how much they're going to share, how far they want to commit, what steps. They take ownership of everything.
They do, totally.
Yeah, much more empowering. So we're going to take another break, and we'll come back for our last segment for tonight. You're listening to Mediation Station on CHHA 1610 AM, Voices Latinas, the first community and ethnic station licensed in Canada.
Voices Latinas, 1610 AM.
Welcome back. We're here tonight with Cinnie Noble, and we're talking about coaching courage to be in conflict. What is meant by that?
Well, I mentioned earlier that a lot of people have fears about being in conflict, and I'm going to just actually read a few little sentences because I'm not from an article I wrote. It's called Fear Factor, and it's actually on mediate.com. And it occurred to me over time about the number of fears I was hearing, that in fact then it takes courage to be in conflict. And so I thought, well, what does that really mean? So just a few things that I'll read to you. It takes courage to listen to and observe another person's pain directed at you, at us. And it takes courage to regulate our emotions. It requires courage to take responsibility for our own contribution to the discord. It requires courage to accept disappointments, that we don't always get what we want, that we are going to disappoint others who think that we ought to get better or more than we do. It takes courage to separate win and lose and right and wrong, and to accept differences happen, to know when to stand up and when to step down. It takes courage to apologize and to forgive and to let go. It takes courage to check out our assumptions and to let go of them if we find out that they aren't what we thought they were. It really requires courage to change and to give up our strongly held beliefs and positions. We need courage to swallow our pride and set our egos aside. It takes courage to walk away, and it takes courage to know that some things just may not mend, and that they may rather end the relationship. And there are more aspects of courage that I'm referring to in the article, but one of the things that I loved in a book by Brene Brown, I love the book title, it's called The Gifts of Imperfection. And Brene Brown talks about vulnerability and shame in much of her work, but The Gifts of Imperfection refers to the fact that people learn swimming by swimming, and they learn courage by couraging. And so for me, that gave me a lot of support around what I do as a coach, and that is when you support people and they know that you believe in them and that you trust them, and that they have the that you trust them as being creative, resourceful, and whole, as I referred to earlier, then helping them align who they want to be with what their values are is such a fabulous part of conflict coaching. And so people might learn couraging by practicing and by being free and liberated enough to know that you're not going to make fun, you're going to support them, you're going to work with them on that. And so it's really about giving people the skills by helping them help themselves. And so I think of that whole idea of courage, encouraging is such an integral part of any coaching relationship for that matter. But in conflict management coaching, people are usually trying to be different and do different about something that it creates so much emotion in them. And so it's how to have courage to have those emotions but express them in a way that is more productive and less destructive.
Right, and ultimately reaches where you really want to be. People's
Exactly.
getting there is, that's provides for change, and it's people have to go from where they're at to somewhere new, and there's a gap there. So that's the fears. People have to go through the fears to get to the change that ultimately they feel would be better.
And I'm glad you mentioned the gap, because in a classic coaching framework, you look at here's where the person is on the left side, here's where they want to be on the right side. And that gap in between is how does a coach help them have different perspectives, look at what else could there be, what are the possibilities, how will I make this action possible, feasible, and what will get in the way of it. So my own synergy model actually follows that framework, that general framework in a more specific way, geared just to conflict.
Right, and so people have to be open in order to make themselves vulnerable.
Right.
In some form. It's the unknown, right? When you're in conflict, you may not be happy with it, at least though, in some form, you found a way to cope.
Right.
You struggle within the struggle, though that's your safe space, because at least it's known. Going to something new is the unknown, and that could be a greater barrier for you to walk through your fears.
Well, that uncertainty is really, I think, what drives a lot of people to make decisions they don't really want to, and that I think it's what I would refer to. And there's a lot of brain science. I've been studying a lot, workshops and books, and I don't pretend to know it all, but I've certainly, there's enough that convinces me that people make decisions and cannot be very creative and don't know how to problem solve when they're upset. And so when you help people in distance themselves in coaching and be able to step back and reflect, the way that they then manage things is far different than if you'd spent that time helping them deal with the vulnerability about it.
Yeah. So how have you been affected by the work you're doing with people in terms of trying to create positive change?
I feel just so blessed that this career came to me and that I had skills to build on to get here, because I find it much more rewarding in many ways than I have anything else that I've done, except maybe the travel for people with disabilities. But in my transition of careers, the motto of my company is peace building, one person at a time. And I think that if I can help one person be different, that I've done something, that I'm here for a purpose, and that what makes me happy is making a difference. And I've seen it happen over and over, and I think the impact has just been huge for me is being satisfied with what I do in life.
Yeah, it's where you're at, who you are. You're doing, quote, the right thing.
Yeah.
Because it's connected to the person you are and your practice of it.
Right, yeah.
In terms of getting the feedback from individuals with whom you interact with. Yeah. It's
true. It's
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah. So, are there any unexpected things that have happened through your time as a coach?
I think what's unexpected is when I started, I didn't realize how expansive it would be, and that, so I train people all over the world in this. People are looking, and lots of people are looking for one-on-one coaches and mediators, lawyers and psychologists and others, ways to help people find their way through conflict. And so what's unexpected is just how much it grew. I've got a thriving practice, it's much in demand, and I've trained lots of people who also are building their practices, and I think I've just seen a shift of my own and personally and professionally. I think it's just expanded my way of thinking, and I think probably the most rewarding is that I have learned things that I didn't know, and I've still got so much to learn, and I love that I'm a continuous learner, and that
You're a student, right?
I'm always a student.
Of life.
And that my clients, it's awesome. They are the ones that teach me by virtue of what they're going through, and I'm just feel like sort of the catalyst, but it's all about them, and I think that's just a really great way for me to practice.
So why don't you do a shout out? What's your contact information? How can people learn more about it?
Right, so I am based in Toronto, but my website is the easiest way to get hold of me, really. So it's Synergy Coaching, CINERGY coaching.com, www. My email is Cinnie, CINNIE, @synergycoaching.com. I don't need to spell that again, probably. But if you go to my site, I have a blog, a weekly blog. It's called Conflict Mastery Questions. I'm just finishing a book on that. And it's really, one of the biggest skills you ever learn in coaching is about asking powerful questions, reflective questions. And I love them. I'm fascinated by questions. And so the book is about kinds of questions you can ask for various aspects of conflict.
Okay, so, we talked tonight about, working with people, conflict, having courage to be in conflict, to work through conflict. What is important to leave listeners from the discussion today?
I guess, what's really important is that if you want to change, you can change, that it does require commitment. I think one of the biggest things is we're at choice, and I think people often don't think we have choice when we're in conflict, and we absolutely have choice, and it's helping knowing that we can do something differently and that we can be happier and live happier lives because of it. Seems to me to be a huge sort of takeaway that I've learned and that I'd like to pass on to people.
So thanks very much for coming out on Sunday evening to share with us.
Thanks, Greg. It's a pleasure.
And helping.
meeting Alexander and Sabrina.
Yeah, that's part of the group package here. So I want to thank both of them, Alexandra and Sabrina, for assisting. And you can contact us at Mediation Station at 647-227-4734 or send an email to greggf@primus.ca. So have a good night and good week from CHHA. We'll see you next week. See you sometime, Mom and